to those who abuse themselves and others, and those who revive again, to those who are physically, mentally, or spiritually incapable by accident or by birth, to those who seek strength in our spirituality and ways of life, and those who exploit it, even our own, to those who fall for the lies and join the dividing lines that keep us fighting amongst each other, to the outsiders who step in, good or bad, and those of us who don't know better, to the leaders and prisoners of war, politics, crime, race, and religion, innocent or guilty, to the young, the old.
Some people are extremely fixated on the concept of judgment. Sometimes this fixation is politically motivated, socially motivated, but there is this fixation on humanity being punished. And then you have individuals that are focused on judgment with respect to spirituality. And so the judgment is not coming from Mother Nature in this case, but many people believe that the judgment is coming from what they understand to be God. That's fine. However, there is an obsession with this dynamic. And this obsession seems to be extremely high with respect to those who understand themselves as being a part of the Abrahamic traditions, those who claim to be descended from Abraham or related to Abraham on either a genetic level or a spiritual level. So whether we are talking about the secular humanist focus on judgment, or whether we are talking about the religious focus on judgment, we are talking about individuals and collectives of individuals who are fixated on humanity suffering based upon a belief in mistakes that humanity has made. And so there is a focus or a fixation on comeuppance, okay, getting those just desserts. There is an obsession with there being a verdict about these behaviors. There is a fixation on individuals and collectives of individuals suffering some sort of punishment based upon this belief in guilt. And so what's also interesting about this is that it's not just about punishment wherein someone stops doing whatever it is that someone is doing and they sort of change course. The type of punishment that is associated with all of these judgment proclamations, that punishment involves destruction. It is a very heinous type of judgment when you hear individuals talk about the type of judgment they are anticipating for different countries, nations, collectives of people. And what's interesting is they tend to belong to the collectives that they are calling down all of these curses upon. What's also noteworthy is that with respect to this judgment of others, some of it really seems to be about projection, where individuals are magnifying something negative in themselves in someone else while denying it in self. And so subsequent to these projections, many individuals are, again, calling down these curses. They are calling down curses as if they are in a Marvel episode, and they are calling down the type of curse that you have with Thanos, okay? And so there is this destructive wish that many people have for humanity. It is a destructive wish that they have for collectives that are either near or far to where they are. It's very, very interesting. And so they are calling down these curses of desolation and proclaiming all sorts of judgments on various people and believing that these people should be destroyed because of whatever it is that the individuals believe they have done wrong. And what's also noteworthy is even if there are innocent people or people who have done no wrong related to what they are referring to, they tend to see them as sort of collateral damage, sort of a necessary evil in order to have the punishment, the condemnation carried out. What's also interesting is that, oftentimes with those projections, there is the need to divert attention. And so it stands out that individuals who identify with the Abrahamic narratives would be calling down curses on anyone. What has been noted is that often this calling down of judgment is related to behaviors that have been identified in Scripture or have been identified in history. And so with the individuals who identify with the Abrahamic narrative and identify themselves as descendants of Ishmael or descendants of Isaac, those collectives in particular have been extensively involved in land grab dynamics, genocidal dynamics, and a global slave trade. And so you have the individuals who identify as Ishmael participating in what would be considered the trans-Saharan slave trade. And then their cousins, those identifying as Isaac, participating in the transatlantic slave trade. And so collectively, Abraham has created quite a dynamic on this earth. And so it's interesting that often these are the same individuals that are calling down curses on others based upon wrongs that they believe they have identified in others. This is particularly noteworthy with respect to the collective who is now currently identifying as Judah. And with respect to Judah, you not only have some individuals identifying as Judah calling down these curses and judgments right now, but some other individuals that identify with the other siblings that were born of Jacob. And interestingly, part of the judgment that they believe that Americans need to suffer is related to the transatlantic slave trade. Now, of course, judgment has not been delivered. Mercy has not been adequately delivered in relation to all of the things that took place with the transatlantic slave trade and the Indian removals and the indigenous removals in Africa, in Europe, in the Americas, in Asia. No, there has not been justice for the people who have been harmed. But it's interesting to note that many individuals who identify with this Judah identity, they take pleasure in identifying with that kingdom of Judah that was on the west coast of Africa, ignoring the fact that this was one of the largest slave trading enterprises related to the transatlantic slave trade. And so that entity known as Judah was responsible for that in concert with another collective of folks who identified themselves as Israel or that 10 northern tribe collective. Okay. And so often under the auspices of Christianity or some sort of Israelism or Hebrewism, these entities are often fond of calling down these curses, calling down judgments upon people that they have identified as wrongdoers, while at the same time glorying in the wrongdoing of their ancestors, or reframing it so that it is seen as honorable. Where have we seen that before? And so what we're going to be doing is looking at the culpability of this entity known as Judah, that in current times frequently calls down these curses, condemnations, and judgments upon many people. Many individuals who identify as Judah also identify as having prophetic gifting. And often these prophecies involve calling down these curses and these judgments for the wrongdoers. What's noteworthy is that at the same time, these individuals don't seem to recognize that they themselves are on the boat that they wish to sink. Now, this Thanos theology is definitely a theology of suffering. And you might have noted that this Thanos theology has escalated in recent times with respect to the tragedy that is occurring in the state of California. And so you have a number of individuals with this Thanos theology, whether we are talking about individuals who are coming from that secular humanist perspective, or whether we are talking about individuals coming from a purely religious or spiritual perspective. A number of individuals have identified this tragedy as some sort of divine judgment on the people in California, and to a larger extent, the people in the United States, so the people in America. And so many of them, instead of praying for the individuals in California, they have taken this as an opportunity to sort of glory in the tragedy, identifying it as a prophesied divine judgment on the people in California, and then again, to a larger extent, the people of the Americas. And so you have a number of individuals that are very proficient at identifying dynamics that they believe justify destruction, that they believe justifies desolation. And again, part of these dynamics are taking place wherein individuals don't seem to recognize, or maybe they do, that they are essentially calling down curses upon themselves. For this discussion, we're going to be turning our attention back to the Colonial Williamsburg Slavery Remembrance Site. This is a resource that provides significant information related to various aspects of the transatlantic slave trade. And so we're going to be looking specifically at the transatlantic slave trade, and very specifically at the activities of what was known as the Kingdom of Judah. If you are new to our discussions, you might not be aware of the fact that we've done extensive research into the transatlantic slave trade, and very specifically extensive examination of this Kingdom of Judah that goes by many names, as a matter of fact. And so that creates quite a bit of confusion about the exact identity of this particular kingdom. However, there are many people who are laying claim to this kingdom, and so we are going to proceed based upon the claims to the kingdom. And so on this Colonial Williamsburg website, we have the Judah kingdom spelled Ouidah, so Ouidah. The other spellings are Juda, Juida, Ajuda, Xweda, Hueda. It indicates here Ouidah, also known as Ouidah, and this is with the Whydah, is a commercial center in the modern African nation of Benin. That was one of the most active slave trading ports in all of Africa. It is also noted that this slave trading activity is also noted in Scripture. And when I say Scripture, I mean the traditional standard Scripture. Continuing on, we have Europeans call the Bight of Benin, where Ouidah is located, and the surrounding region the Slave Coast. And so the kingdom of Judah was known as the Slave Coast because of its importance in supplying American markets with African laborers. Historians estimate that over the course of 2 centuries, Ouidah alone exported more than 1 million Africans before closing its trade in the 1860s. Only one other port in Africa, Luanda, in Central Africa, transported a greater volume of slaves. It's important to also keep in mind that there was a switch in rulership in that Bight of Benin area in the later 1700s. There was a battle in order to control the slave trade industry there. And so the kingdom of Dahomey had a fight with the kingdom of Judah. And based upon this, individuals from the kingdom of Judah, many of them were enslaved and then transported. It's important to also keep in mind that there was the assertion that these various entities on the west coast of Africa were related to each other in one way or another. And so there were relationships between the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Dahomey. There was also relationship with Oyo. Okay, so there was a confederacy of sorts, and this confederacy also included those who were working in the same industry in Europe and North Africa. It indicates here that the earliest European settlement in Ouidah began near an existing African town there in the late 1600s, but did not become well established until 1704. This is interesting for a number of reasons, because there was a child monarch that rose up to take over that particular kingdom. This occurred when French traders built a fortified trading post. Now, if you recall, French traders were also creating trading posts in the Americas. This article goes on to indicate over time, traders representing several different European nations constructed their own forts to tap into the town's growing markets. In 1727, the kingdom of Dahomey conquered Ouidah, and its African political leadership. This process eventually helped to increase the size of Ouida and, in turn, its commercial importance. The article goes on to indicate that there was a definite confederacy going on with respect to Europe and the west coast of Africa. It indicates here that Ouida's population, or Judah's population, was predominantly African. However, it also indicates only a few hundred European residents lived there through much of the 18th and 19th centuries, while the overall population grew from less than 10,000 to almost 30,000 in the same period. The article continues, as was the case in some other slave trading ports, sale of captive Africans at Judah was managed in part by an African royal monopoly, but was largely conducted by private merchants. These middlemen supplied captives from the African interior who had been taken by Dahomean state military campaigns or who had been purchased from other inland traders. And this is supposed to be a depiction of the European trading post in the 1720s. Based upon historical narratives, there has also been the suggestion that Dahomey is associated with Dan. And here you see this procession of the serpent in Ouida, Dahomey. This is supposed to be in April of 1725. And so it's also noted that Ouida, or Judah, or Dahomey had a special relationship with the snake, with the serpent, and there were ceremonies associated with essential worship of the serpent. Now we're going to look at some data related to the transatlantic slave trade and the Kingdom of Judah, Kingdom of Ouida. The data has been compiled for the years 1514 through 1866, and so it covers a few centuries there. What has been noted in the database is that there were approximately 1,104 slave ship voyages from the Kingdom of Judah. Hence the focus on 1,104. Before we look at the data, I want to point out something related to this apparent confederacy. There are multiple entities that have suggested, asserted that the 10 dispersed or lost tribes of Jacob were in Europe and that they were on the thrones of various sovereigns in Europe. This is noteworthy because they are also known as the Northern Kingdom. Okay, so those 10 northern tribes, they are known as the Northern Kingdom. And that particular kingdom was known as Israel. Okay, this is all Jacob. It's just that the descendants were broken up into these two kingdoms. The other kingdom was known as the Southern Kingdom. And interestingly, there have been assertions that the entities that comprise the Southern Kingdom of Jacob, that they were situated on the west coast of Africa. And so geographically, it has been noted that the 10 northern tribes are literally north of the southern tribes. And the southern kingdom is known as the kingdom of Judah. Interestingly, these are the entities that were running the transatlantic slave trade. These are also the entities that were involved in the colonization of the Americas. So now let's go back to the slave voyages database, and we are looking at transatlantic slavery. There's also a part of the database that looks at the intra-American slave trade. And so not going across the Atlantic, but what was going on this side of the Atlantic. And so again, looking at the itineraries, we have 1,104 slave voyages coming out of this kingdom of Judah. Here we have the breakdown of the number of captives that were sent from the kingdom of Judah. We have, in terms of how many embarked, 405,864. And this is for 1,101 voyages. There's another interesting notation about the enslaved people that disembarked, and it is indicated that 344,322 disembarked. That means that many people were lost in the middle of this. And so that would have been 1,092 voyages. It indicates here that the percentage of enslaved people who died during the crossing amounted to approximately 14%. The percentage of males who had been enslaved and sent from the kingdom of Judah amounted to 61.3%. The percentage of children that were enslaved by the kingdom of Judah amounted to 20.2%. And here you can see the total number of captives and the total number of voyages more clearly. And here you can see a little bit better the duration of the captives crossing. You can see the percentage of male captives more clearly, and you can see the percentage of children captured more clearly. And here we're going to review specific year ranges for the transportation of enslaved people to specific places coming from the kingdom of Judah. And so the kingdom of Judah transported during 1651 through 1675, 459 enslaved people into the Caribbean. 259 individuals went to an unspecified place. From 1676 to 1700, we have over 46,000 going to the Caribbean, 1,074 going to the Spanish mainland Americas. And then in 1701 through 1725, we have the Kingdom of Judah shipping 1,766 enslaved individuals to mainland North America, and then over 100,000 were shipped to the Caribbean, over 9,000 shipped to the Spanish mainland Americas, 17,000, in excess of 17,000 shipped to Brazil. And then in 1726 through 1750, 406 went to Europe. Over 900 to mainland North America, 53,000, in excess of 53,000 to the Caribbean again, over 5,000 to Brazil. And you can see the totals over on the right-hand side. And so this is for this time period, the Kingdom of Judah shipping to the west for the most part, but then you also see the Europe destination. Okay, continuing on here, we see from 1751 through 1775, Judah shipped over 2,000 to mainland North America, over 48,000 to the Caribbean, over 13,000 to Brazil, and over 1,000 to an unspecified location. From 1776 through 1800, we have over 26,000 going to the Caribbean, over 15,000 going to Brazil. 1801 through 1825, over 3,000 going to the Caribbean, over 10,000 going to Brazil. Another 1,900 going to Africa. This is likely a result of individuals being intercepted and sent to Sierra Leone and Liberia. There was a period when the slave trade had been outlawed, and so the ships were basically diverted and sent back to Africa. And then you have from 1826 through 1850, over 7,000 to the Caribbean, over 10,000 to Brazil, another 6,000, in excess of 6,000 back to Africa. 1851 through 1875, have over 500 going to mainland North America, over 6,000 to the Caribbean, and then another 690 being diverted essentially back to Africa. So when considering data such as this, it brings up a number of questions. There are many people who are identifying as this Kingdom of Judah, while simultaneously identifying as victims of the Kingdom of Judah. It's all very confusing, quite frankly. However, what is noteworthy and deserves significant attention is the repetitive proclamations, the repetitive prophecies about the entities that were involved in the transatlantic slave trade being due judgment. In fact, this scripture from the book of Revelation is often invoked. And you also hear more recently these invocations of judgment related to America. What's noteworthy in all of this apparent projection, is that the prophecies and these conversations and all of these proclamations about judgment leave out a pivotal entity in the entire dynamic. And that entity is this Kingdom of Judah that was pretty much the slave trading capital at one point, before it was dismantled, apparently, by what would be considered, based upon the lineages, the Fawn people, presumably many people that are in the French-speaking areas currently. And so there's a question about the implications for all of these judgment proclamations. Because according to Scripture, if people are reading Scripture, according to Scripture, Jacob the descendants of Jacob, are well known for being involved in the slave trade. And the scripture serves as an indictment on that. And here we have another indictment based upon historical record related to this slave trading pattern. And then we have this prophetic word that is frequently used as an indictment for others related to the slave trade. And it touches on this dynamic in what's known as equity. So you have law and you have equity. And one of the things that people need to be on the lookout for when they are pursuing equity is they must have what's known as clean hands. He who seeks equity must do equity. And so you cannot come to equity with unclean hands. You can't come to the judgment of others when you yourself, based upon your own assertions, are due the judgment that you are proclaiming for other people. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the relevant scripture, and this is just one relevant scripture, the scripture starts off at Revelation 13:9. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity.
To those who abuse themselves and others, and those who revive again, to those who are physically, mentally, or spiritually incapable by accident or by birth, to those who seek strength in our spirituality and ways of life, and those who exploit it, even our own, to those who fall for the lies and join the dividing lines that keep us fighting amongst each other, to the outsiders who step in, good or bad, and those of us who don't know better, to the leaders and prisoners of war, politics, crime, race, and religion, innocent or guilty,